Misty there? No. I'm just waiting for Misty and then we'll get going. Even though we have a quorum, I don't want her to miss anything. So what time do you need to leave so that you can make that board meeting?
6:30.
Oh, we're not gonna be here
I was-
that long, my gosh.
Yeah, we could do it in 10 minutes.
I figured half an hour, not tops. Yeah, okay. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't like 5 o'clock that you need to be running out the door.
No, we're okay.
Okay, all right.
Now, I told them I might be late to put the important stuff at the end, so.
Did you text her to reminder?
I just did.
Okay. All right, I'll give her one more minute and then we'll start. All right, well, I'm just gonna go ahead and start without her.
Okay, I'll keep an eye if she jumps on with you.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started, and for the recording, today is Tuesday, August 27th, 2024, and it's 4:36. And we are having a special town council meeting tonight on the sole issue of, the zone change request by Shirley Hall to rezone, let's see, was it 7 parcels?
She just jumped on.
Okay. 7 parcels. From, some are residential, some are rural residential, but the plan, the request is for all 7 to be zoned commercial. And, we had put this off for 6 months because we were going to work on a light commercial zone that, some town council members felt was better appropriate for this property. And, but that has not come to pass yet, so now we are going to address the rezone request. Go forward. So, is she on yet?
Yeah, Misty, can you hear us?
Maybe she's on mute.
There we go. I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so when we had voted on this in February, I believe it was February, the vote was 3-2. Misty and I were in favor of rezoning this commercial, and the other three were not. They wanted to wait for a neighborhood commercial zone. And since we do not have the neighborhood commercial zone and we're ready to move forward, I know that Misty and I are still of the same opinion with regard to the rezone request, so it's really, in my mind, what we're going to do going forward with the difference in opinion. What do you guys propose for, to move forward?
Well, since I've been on the council, we've had 3 requests for rezones. The first one was on the west end of town. There was a request to change a rural residential to commercial. That parcel was surrounded by rural residential. So my opinion was that it should not be changed to commercial. The second one was on the east end of town. That was last month. That was a property that was surrounded by highway resort zone, and they requested a zone change from rural residential to highway resort zone. And since that property was surrounded by highway resort zone, I felt it was appropriate that that should be rezoned. This property is 7 parcels of residential and rural residential. It's surrounded by residential. So in my opinion, especially with our commercial zone that allows motels and food trucks and some of the other allowable building, I just don't think it's appropriate. And this is in the middle of town and it's surrounded by rural residential, so I feel strongly that it shouldn't be zoned commercial at this time. I'm in favor of a small commercial or whatever we wanted to call it, neighborhood commercial. We have that already in the beginning, early stages. I know that government doesn't always work as quickly as people would like it to, but I am of the opinion that we need to work on that and establish a zone that's more appropriate for that location. So I would be voting no.
First, let me say that I think I said this in February and I'll say it again. Because it is a request from the halls, it makes it a very difficult request in the amount of service you and your family have given to this town. Oh my goodness, I spent hours in the back room looking at various documents for the last 2.5 years. You don't know how many times I've seen the hall's name on some type of document, and there are good pieces of documents and work that's been done. So that alone really makes it difficult for me, because in my heart for your service, I want to grant it, but I've stuck with my position from day one since I've been elected, and I've addressed more zone changes than April has, and anything that's connected to commercial, I voted no on. Because to me, we need to develop, and I've said this from the beginning, and I think it's been my insistence from the beginning that we even got to the point where we're at considering a buffer zone of some type, a light commercial. So what I've been pushing for since day one, 2.5 years ago, is some type of light commercial or some type of buffer zone that's next to residential. It's commercial uses. And since I have to put up a complete town where it doesn't change, I think the use is too intense for this neighborhood. And how easy it is to make ordinance changes into the zone code makes it really difficult for me to vote in favor of this application. I'm hoping when the neighborhood commercials, that we create more of a buffer zone that includes businesses and that can live in harmony with residential. And so this time my vote is no, based on the current commercial.
Do you go on and discuss your proposal that you made at the town council meeting a week ago? No?
No, I'm taking the admonishment of the town attorney into consideration.
Oh, okay. So.
Can I ask what the admonishment of the town?
Yeah, the town. 2 months, or not 2 months ago, I guess it was not the last meeting, but maybe the previous meeting that you were at. Not the last one, but the one before, we talked about the possibility of doing some type of development agreement that put a deed restriction on commercial uses on that. And it was more of a discussion when I raised that last time. The admonishment of the town attorney was be careful of exactions. And so, yeah, I really agree with them that, yeah, it's better to have a clean break. Is that something you want to propose? I would be glad to consider it. But I do say, I'd like to really see what comes out of that neighborhood commercial. That'd be my preference. I'm open to maybe a development agreement. It can work out, but that's got to be proposed by you. My preference is actually some type of neighborhood like commercial. More flexibility than with a neighborhood commercial. That's something you can always switch to also. I think that's what your comment was, is that if you went to commercial with restrictions, you would be able to come back and request a neighborhood commercial, replace the commercial designation. And that's always a possibility.
Can I make a proposal,
Yes.
Mayor?
Yeah, sure.
Talking to the mic here.
Okay.
So I assume we would have a discussion today. Please state my name for the record. My name is Dayton Hall. And I am the representative for the Darwin and Trinity Hall Family Trust, the applicant for this zone change application. I expected to talk about a development agreement today, and I expected you to make a proposal.
I did too.
But I'm happy to make the proposal that I think that you were contemplating at our last meeting. So what we would be willing to do. Well, first of all, let me just restate that your commercial zone ordinance says that the commercial zone is available, I quote, available for properties that front SR 9 along this cross section of SR 9. And so it's always been my opinion that the town council by ordinance has limited its legislative authority by passing and allowing that ordinance to remain on the books, and it hasn't been changed even though this has been an issue. So we come at this from a place of, we're entitled to a commercial zone on the 3 parcels that front SR 9. But the reality is that we're here and we don't have the votes. I wasn't able to convince you. So with that understanding, we've got a proposal. And that is that we do first of all, we'll agree to remove 4 of the parcels that don't front SR 9 from the application. We would stipulate that those would be removed from the application, but on the condition that when we refile a zone change application for those 4 parcels, that the application fee would be waived when in fact there is a neighborhood commercial zone in place, that we wouldn't have to repay that application fee for the 4 parcels that do not front SR9. So we'd stipulate to the removal of those 4. Regarding the 3, that front SR9, we would be okay to a development agreement that would be reported against the property that would not allow hotels and motels as defined, as set out in 40.10 of the commercial code. And we would also stipulate that the zone would not allow gas stations. I believe those are the 2 things that Councilman Louie was concerned about. We would request, though, that since we're giving up something here that I feel like we're not required to give up under the town's ordinance, that the remaining conditional uses in 40.10 be made permitted uses under that development agreement, so that we wouldn't have to go through that process, which I understand is pretty intensive.
For the conditional use
For
process.
the conditional use process, we were just, I mean, those other items in there, those would be permitted uses under this commercial zone for these 3 parcels that front SR9. So that's our proposal. I think we would agree to that. And I'm not sure if the town's done development agreements recently. My suggestion would
We
be,
have never done
Well, we've done
one
we did 1 development agreement with Stu Ferber for the hotel.
for the hotel.
That's the only one.
there's 2 ways you can go about it. If the council wants to explore this, you could just vote to, well, you could vote to approve it, subject to a development agreement, list out those terms, leave it in your town attorney's hands to reduce that to writing, and it wouldn't have to come back. If you wanted to see it though, then you could continue this with direction to your town attorney to draft a development agreement with those terms, and then you could actually approve the development agreement itself. Those are the 2 ways I would do it if I were you. Those are your 2 options.
What
We would
about,
still have to vote to approve the development agreement either way, right?
You could authorize your town attorney with those parameters
Oh,
to approve
my
that.
concern is the lack of public participation and recommendation from planning and zoning on that particular development agreement, especially if it's involving land use and the changes of the administrative code.
I'm not sure that, development agreements go to planning commission, or do they? What's your experience?
The planning commission had a public hearing on the zone
Yes.
change, and this is gonna be.
But they have not had a public hearing, and we have not received public input on a proposed development agreement that changes CUP uses to permitted uses. And if you know me, I'm a big proponent of public input and public participation. That would be my concern with going the routes that you have mentioned.
What if we left the conditional uses in the conditional use, and we withdraw that request? Would you be okay just to move ahead and not drag us out another 4 months going through that process? Like if we say, no, we're gonna restrict gas stations and hotels, and we'll put that in a development agreement, would you be okay just going ahead without dragging us out more with the planning commission process?
Well, in that case, I do agree with you that that's still related to the zone change. Let me think about that. I think that would still be within our parameters of the requested zone change. The other thing I had mentioned was short-term rentals, and I think the reason you didn't have that as a prohibition is because that's no longer in the code.
They're prohibited uses.
What's that?
Short-term rentals is a prohibited use.
It's a prohibited use.
But there's still food trucks left in there. I don't think many people would not be open to have a food truck court right there next to a residential. neighborhood.
Well, it's not next to residential, you're gonna have a buffer, this is just frontage along SR9.
No, I looked at the map, I mean, it's,
I guess there is one parcel that would front some existing houses. But you can't take all the commercial use of that.
No, no, of
Commercial
course not.
zone, right, that's
no, there's still several
a couple left if you.
permitted uses, there's A, A to O.
So we're willing to leave the conditional uses, conditional uses. So if we take that one out, then could we continue on this path that way? That's my proposal. It's a question.
Well, my past experience with conditional uses on commercial, I guess it depends on who the council is and planning and zoning, but it didn't turn out so well for Desert Gardens, I have to say.
I'm reading the Illinois Development Agreement, so hold on just a second.
Town code or sacred?
State.
I don't believe we have anything in the town.
No, we don't really have anything in town code about development agreements.
So while she's looking at that, Dayton, what was your opinion on Lori Rose's proposal?
I told Lori if the town had an interest in acquiring property for a park and flood management or, all of that, I mean, my mom isn't planning on selling the property right now, that's not the plan. But if the town wanted to make a proposal like that, we'd listen to it. I think that'd be a really neat use for that property. Be a really neat park,
It would be.
but we're not gonna dedicate it to the city.
No, I was
Okay, so here's what I see about development agreements. In the code section on development agreements, what I see is that the only time they require review and recommendation from the planning commission and holding a public hearing is if what we're trying to do is to allow a use that is a prohibited use. That's the only requirement in the code for this to go to the planning commission. Otherwise, there are some restrictions on development agreements. One is that you cannot do a development agreement if the use is a permitted use. So, of course, they're not. What we were talking about was conditional, making them permitted. Your suggestion was making them permitted as part of the development agreement. But it does not require, the only requirement to go to planning commission is if you're trying to take a prohibited use and allow this development agreement to make that a use in that piece of land. Otherwise, they do not require a visit to the planning commission. And then with that in mind, you're saying that if you were to drop the request about the conditional uses being permitted, then I would think that this does not require a visit to planning commission because these are staying committed, conditional uses. And so, for what it's worth. Because I know you are a big fan of, public, yeah, I know you're, yes.
Would you be willing to give the town the right of first refusal on that Lori's proposal on that land? So we would still purchase, we just want the opportunity to purchase it, and the right of first refusal.
In the development agreement, you mean?
Yeah,
Okay, all right, I want to make sure.
That discussion hasn't been had by all town council members about purchasing a property, Mr. Louis.
No, yes, but he's just wanting to know if we could have right of first refusal if they want to do. So we're not saying we want to buy it, we're asking that if they would give us right of first refusal if they considered doing such a thing. just so you know.
So
That's
Misty,
how I read it.
so it's your concern that you want the whole council to make the decision for that to be in the development agreement? Is that what
Yes,
I'm
because
hearing?
that's something, it sounds like a purchase, like an intent to purchase. If we include it in the development agreement, and that needs to be discussed by all town council members, not just suggested by a citizen of our community. We need to do it as a group.
Okay,
Mayor, maybe I can make this simpler.
I think I bet I know where you're going.
We've, I've got some nieces and nephews that have expressed interest in buying it. I think that's not something that we're
Okay,
interested. I think we wanna have the option to sell it to family or somebody that might want to. My mom really likes the idea of it being a horse property and, you know, selling it to somebody that's gonna use it the way we've always used it. So that's not something we're willing to entertain.
Okay.
A first right of refusal, but I'm not saying if the town comes and says, hey, we got it appraised. And, you know, maybe my mom's done taking care of it and
uh-huh.
the family doesn't want to, we'd be open to something.
But still, this is something that we could, the way I see this, Misty, is that if we approve the zone change subject to a development agreement with one of the two procedures, either way that you were proposed, that when it comes time to do a development agreement, I mean, as we work out elements of a development agreement, that gives time for the town council to have on the agenda a discussion of this exact thing that you are concerned about. And then and depending on if we get it appraised and there's if Shirley says, you know, maybe I would be willing to consider it, we just need to have the possibility that we can pursue this that is not closed down completely. Let's just put it that way.
I feel like we are already asking them to jump through a lot of hoops and we're strong arming them in a way. I don't feel like we should add that in the development agreement as a condition of the development agreement. That's unfair to the property owner.
And they've already declined that, so.
Okay, so the proposal was either, the two methods that you proposed was, one, subject to a development agreement that we authorize the town attorney to go forward and develop. Second, subject to a development agreement that would come back to the town council for approval. Those were basically your two suggestions.
Correct.
If we were to go forward with it, okay. So how does that sit with either of you?
So since we've never done a development agreement, I really don't have.
The town has done one before with Stu.
I'm not familiar with the development agreement. So I don't see how that really would change my mind. I mean, I want to be consistent in how I voted over my time as a council person. And so I think I would just have to still say, no, I would be more comfortable if we had our like neighborhood commercial zoning in our code, and I'd probably be fine to, from what I've seen of our light commercial that we started, I feel more comfortable with that type of uses on that property where it's located.
Do you ever town code?
I do. Where are you, Paul?
Oh, I'm just looking at. Commercial.
Oh. You don't have to touch. There we go.
So basically, April, basically what we were discussing was with them removing the eligibility for removing hotels, motels, gas station. what would ultimately happen, in my opinion, with the development agreement is you would end up with neighborhood commercial. With whatever, it would be very close to whatever a neighborhood commercial zone would be anyway.
I would have to see it before I would vote on it.
So what section are you looking at, Paul?
So I was looking at all the uses,
Oh, okay,
and so, so I had mentioned, of course, no short-term rentals, which is out.
already out of there anyway.
My concern would be how easy it is if council changes to add that back in. Second, would be, we say no hotels, no,
These are all the conditional.
yeah, there was no hotels and no gas stations. April was concerned about food
Food
trucks.
trucks, yes, I see that.
And then when I had proposed the neighborhood district zone, I had limited the size of restaurants in my proposal. But for the give and take, I guess that would be something that would be a concern of mine.
So,
So the restrictions on the no motel and no
yes,
gas station, that would be implemented by deed restriction.
but in the development agreement,
Yeah, we'd agree to that in the development agreement, we'd agree that that would restrict the deed, the development agreement would run with the land.
Okay.
And so it would be continue on with future owners. Yeah, so that's generally how you do development agreement.
so we have two proposals from Dayton. One, we agree to the rezone subject to a development agreement and list in the, here, what we would want restricted, or we rezone subject to a development agreement that comes back to the town council.
My preference would be that come back to the
That's
council.
what I figured.
Yeah,
And since April was saying she wouldn't vote for a development agreement unless she could review it, this other way is saying it comes back to the town council for approval. And then we would review it.
so does Ms. have comments, or does she want to make a motion?
Which, will you guys explain to me the second part again?
Okay, what Dayton had proposed is that we approve the rezone subject to a development agreement. And then we have two ways forward with the development agreement. One, we just say, here, Heath, write a development agreement with these conditions in the development agreement. Or we, number two, we send it to Heath and Heath can start drafting the development agreement in conjunction with Dayton and Shirley, sorry. And, with their input, and then it comes to town council for us to review and approve. The
How
development
quickly can we make that happen?
Well, I
Next, right.
I bet that Heath has a template in his files
Okay.
that he can start with.
okay,
I know I've got some I can. start
that you could
with.
start with too,
So
okay,
I
you
think we
could,
could do it in the next week.
I was gonna say, you could propose something.
Probably
send
if
it
you
over to Heath.
proposed and send it to you, it would get
Yeah.
done faster.
Yeah. So we might possibly have something on our next agenda. Misty. In fact, I'm already
Okay.
getting some on our September agenda.
All right,
just-
Dayton, are you okay waiting that long? I just don't want to delay you guys any longer with a decision.
Yeah, we can do next. And thank you for asking.
Let me tell you the date. Next month's meeting, by the way, is the fifth. Oh, wait, it should, the 17th. September 17th is our next town council meeting. And we can also have something on our work meeting, which would be on the 12th. Where we can have discussion, there would be a decision, and then on 17th, or,
Thursday nights are hard for me.
Thursdays.
I have either city council or planning commission every Thursday.
all right, so Tuesday, but you would at least be able to be there, do you think, on the 17th?
Yes, I can be here on the 17th.
17th. So this would also stipulate to remove those 4 parcels from the rezone request, or as part of the development agreement, or what? How are we gonna do with those other 4?
I would address all of them. I would address the stipulation to remove the 4, but contingent on the future application fee being waived for those 4 parcels for the neighborhood commercial. And then address the rezone on the 3 with frontage, but with the additional restrictions on the uses for those 3. Do it all together so that it's all clear and about it.
So let's review the restrictions now are no motels and no
Gas station.
no gas station. And what's the consideration of April's request for no food trucks?
I will say there's a lot of permitted uses in that commercial zone. Just reviewing it here.
Is that a permitted or conditional?
That's a conditional,
That's a condition.
food trucks are a conditional use. There's not very many conditional uses of that. 1, 2, 3, 4,
Sure,
5, 6, 7, 8.
that's fine. Oh, we have a question. These are conditional uses. These are permitted uses. So trail ride staging. General convenience store, shuttle stops. Vet clinic, schools. So we want to add an equestrian use as a permitted use, and we can define that in the development agreement. That we agree, that's what we're thinking, right?
Yeah.
Like horse training, equestrian use.
Okay, well, I was actually gonna ask, I was sitting here debating, asking you, because I was like, this will make the meeting longer, but I was debating, asking you, what did you have in mind when you guys were talking about horses, and it had always been for horses, and you would like to be able to keep it that way? What would you have in mind? And I was actually gonna ask that before you brought this up.
And so if you look at equestrian facilities, you have a barn or a stable, you have turnouts, padlocks and pastures. You have a marine, we already have a small marine that would probably need to be expanded for that type of facility. But that's the type of, a horse training facility, so place to keep your horse, place to ride your horse, place to turn your horse out to pasture.
So the trail ride staging, number 2, and conditional uses, that wouldn't exactly fit your.
No, I actually haven't read the definition of that, but I assume that's more of,
No. Yeah.
yeah, it was.
Yeah, we can do that. We can leave it as a conditional use.
There's just some grandkids that are thinking about,
But I understand what you're saying is when you look at our permitted uses and our conditional uses, none of them have a training facility like what you're talking about, which would not be inconsistent with the trail ride. It's not too inconsistent, in my opinion, but you may.
So, but in commercial, in rural residential, there's a permitted use for agriculture. That would include horses, and that's already in your rural residential. Permitted uses.
business,
What's that?
own a business.
It just says agriculture includes tilling of the soil, raising crops, horticulture and gardening. Animals and fowl for recreational use or family food production, primary use of person residing on a premise. Keeping of animals from the health standards set by the local. So
that's the
that
definition.
isn't really wouldn't. But in conditional uses in rural residential, it does have agricultural business, public stable. And that's already in the zone that you're in, allowed. Well, conditional use, so.
Yeah, the definition of public stable is pretty narrow. like a stable where horses are boarded and or kept for remuneration, hire or sell. And so we're looking for something a little bit more broad than that.
What about agricultural business though? Are you looking into definitions?
Yeah, I was just reading the definitions of these different uses. So how about we leave it general now? Let me and Heath work on some specific language on what that equestrian use would look like. And put that in the agreement for you to look at,
Were you considering that as a permitted use or a conditional use?
permitted.
Permitted use.
Already
Yeah,
restricting. well,
yeah, I don't
I'm
have,
gonna quit saying that too.
I don't have an issue with it. Dave, I don't have an issue. I think that's maybe a good change, but it comes back to my theoretic view, okay. Yeah, I guess we're getting beyond what the code says is that is a particular request that we should probably, if we're gonna consider it, should probably be a permanent change to whatever zone that is.
Well, it's actually use already permitted under the current zone.
It's already, so what you're saying
It's a
is,
public state, we just wanna preserve that use.
Yeah.
As we move forward, I don't think keeping the same use needs to go back to planning commission.
yeah, work out the language, let me see how it kind of.
Where's
comes out.
public stable? You're saying that's current use in the residential zone, but it's not in the commercial?
I don't have that, I'm just looking at definitions.
Oh,
Just have the
okay.
definition.
Okay,
So in the agricultural business, which is a conditional use on rural residential, you could basically do, in my interpretation of the definition, you could basically do what you're talking about doing without changing the zone, actually.
Yeah, and we just like to preserve that.
that might, to carry that over into the development.
And really, you get the
Yeah.
best of both worlds.
Just carry it
You
over, yeah.
update the zone so it actually matches what your general plan and your commercial code requires. And you could preserve the historical use if you wanted to, with this equestrian component of it.
Yeah, the way I read that, April, is for personal use, not for commercial use for the animals. In the rural residential, the agricultural portion.
So, no, if you look at the conditional uses,
Okay.
conditional uses.
Let me ask you this,
While they're business, while we're
talking about,
and the personal uses
Yeah, then you go that.
parking,
First-
retail and all that, yeah.
so if this training facility, was this just gonna be personal? Or was this going to be something where you guys might, offer services to train the horses for somebody? Just wondered.
Yes.
Maybe you haven't gone that far.
It's an idea right now.
They want to retain the flexibility.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with that. What about you, Misty? What do you think about any of this that we're talking about?
I think that it should be considered. I think it's a great idea to go ahead and leave it in there because the zone already allows for it as an agricultural use currently.
now. Yeah. So we're kind of combining the current use with, in the development agreement, allowing the current use to go forward with, meanwhile rezoning, where that use is not in there. Although public riding staging is trailer right. So,
So how about a motion?
that's what I was about to say. Yes, Lori.
I'm sorry, this, Lori Rose, just one other, observation. I haven't parsed through all the permitted uses, and these are my neighbors, and I love them dearly. And I'm all over the porch stuff, obviously. But, one of the other permitted uses in the commercial zone that you haven't talked about restricting is restaurants and bars. In our neighborhood, we can hear balcony one from however far away, because outdoor seating happens in restaurants in our type of climate. So I'm concerned about other types of commercial uses that you haven't mentioned as being potentially very problematic for the neighborhood.
Well, what Paul had said was this neighborhood commercial that he was proposing was going to limit the size of a restaurant, but was still going to allow a restaurant. the neighborhood or commercial zone that he's
Yeah,
talking about.
Lori's concern is about the noise
I
created, so,
understand.
yeah.
I understand, but I'm
And-
just saying
yeah.
that you still would want to allow restaurants in the neighborhood or commercial.
Yeah, so maybe the way to skin that is through a noise ordinance.
Yes.
I don't know if that will.
Okay,
Lori's
We have
proposal
noise
may-
ordinances built in already.
okay, so I'm going to make a motion that we approve the rezone request from Shirley Hall to these parcels to be rezoned commercial, subject to a development agreement that we will, work out between, the halls and with our town attorney that will come back to the town council for review and approval.
And
Second,
what's in it,
Well,
part of the motion, so.
well, I'm not putting anything in there just now as part of the motion because what he had proposed earlier is that if we were sending this just to Heath to work on, and that's it, and then there would be a development agreement with no further input from us, then we would, list these restrictions. But if you want the restrictions, then I will amend the motion to say, the development agreement, some of the elements of the development agreement would have no hotel, motel, and no gas station on those parcels, and no food trucks.
and it will not include a intent to purchase from the town.
Correct, and that would also allow a horse training facility with details to be worked out in the development agreement. So that was my amended motion.
Second to the amendment.
All right, yes,
You didn't specify which parcel in your.
no, I did not, I just said I said the parcels in her zone change request. I did not specify, I did not, yes, that's what they requested. And so, that I wasn't gonna sit here, well, I wasn't gonna list all 7 of them because they're right here in her zone change request.
Lori's talking about the first because.
First 3.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
I know.
We
We
probably
didn't
need to
know.
add that those 4 properties won't be included that are on the backside that Dayton was talking about is what they're suggesting.
I understand, but that is not what we talked about right here at the very end. We talked about all 7.
Okay,
So all 7?
That's what we were talking about, that's what we're standing up here talking about. All of them.
Okay, I cannot support all 7 parcels, because I understood that they were gonna remove the 4 back parcels.
He did talk about that, and then you.
So your motion is including all 7, so I'm gonna let you know, give you a chance to decide whether you want to amend it or proceed, but as it stands with all 7, I would be no vote right now. So go ahead and call for a vote, I'm just letting you know, so it's not a surprise.
can we ask Dayton what his intention was? If the second one was for all of the properties or excluding those particular ones?
I didn't think I had the votes to include all 7. It was my understanding that we would only rezone 3. But in the development agreement would be the stipulation that we wouldn't have to pay an application fee on that four. So that was my understanding, and I would be okay with the motion to approve conditioned on this development agreement consistent with the terms that we've discussed today. And instead of trying to list it.
Yeah, list everything, yes, okay.
That'd be fine.
All right, so I will amend this motion that I made to say this applies to parcels B 53, B 73, and B 75. Those are the 3 parcels that front Highway 9.
Second,
Are you now wanting more restrictions?
No, I'm just waiting for
Okay, then I'll,
whatever the next step is.
okay, next step is a vote.
One last comment, I did give a floodplain map to you guys.
Yes, it's here. All right, so,
So it could be with the floodplain, depending on what it,
what goes with the development agreement?
then, some certain types of buildings may not be allowed to be built there because of that.
Well,
Situation.
commercial development of that parcel is gonna have dramatic worsening impact to those of us downtown.
I understand, and what I'm saying is it might be taken care of in the development agreement. There's no indicate, we don't know what's gonna be in the development agreement. I think they have seen this and, it will be taken into consideration, your issue taken care of.
So I'm willing to consider looking at the development agreement and then voting on it, next meeting and discussing it at our work meeting.
Okay, and that is what is on, that was in my motion, that's the one we were going forward with, where the development agreement comes back to the town council for
Correct.
review. Yes. Okay, so let's vote on this so that we can finish this meeting in an hour, and we thought it was gonna be much shorter than that. So,
It never is.
I know, I should know better. Okay, April,
Yes.
Paul,
Aye.
Jean, yes, Misty,
Yes,
okay. So what we have done is we have agreed to rezone the 3 parcels that front Highway 9 in the zone change request, which is B53, B73, and B75. To, those are currently, well, it's a combination of residential and rural residential. And we are rezoning those to commercial zones, subject to a development agreement that Dayton is going to begin working on a development agreement, and you're gonna send it to Heath.
I'll contact the town attorney and we'll get
And
a
you
draft.
guys get drafted on that, and then,
So the zone is subject to approval of the development.
yes, it's subject to approval of the development agreement, it's not just rezone, flat out rezone. And, Dayton's gonna work with Heath on a development agreement, and hopefully there's a rough draft or something that we can look at a work meeting, and then we'll have it on the agenda for, Tuesday, the 17th of September, for us to consider whether to vote for the development agreement or continue it, and whatever we're gonna do.
Yeah, and so on a different matter, like got Dayton here,
Oops, hold on.
okay,
So Dave, he has something.
I have a different question. Because I'm thinking of Lori's proposal, and I don't need an answer, I'm just thinking of a way to do that. Maybe we could purchase right of first refusal if your property is not sold or passed to somebody in the family. So if it's sold or distributed outside the family, the town gets the right of first refusal. That would be, and we would probably purchase that, right of first refusal. So it's something to consider, the town hasn't talked
And it's
about
not
it.
just family, it's also the fact that if somebody is willing to buy it as an equestrian facility, that's really what she would like, and she'd rather sell it to them rather than.
And we could add that also as one of the limitations before we get to exercise the first refusal. I just hate to have that get passed to development that doesn't carry out your wishes, what you wanted to use for, and not have the town an opportunity to purchase it. That's what I'm thinking. So, and it's just brainstorming right now, I'm just trying to
And
figure
it's
out.
not,
a way-
you've already voted on the things.
Yeah, we
so it's not-
already
we're just-
did, that's not part of the development agreement, I'm just trying to,
Yeah.
for you to think about, for us to think about, the way to preserve that, if it's not gonna go the way your family desires it to go.
And I think I can speak for my mom and my siblings, if the town wanted to buy that and we could turn that into the all family park, that'd be really cool. To have like a nice facility there and, you know, I think there's,
And.
if it doesn't sting the family, then that would be great to
I-
do something like that, but I don't think we're willing to bind ourselves in a contract.
And so I think I see a capital improvements request coming from Lori Rose to the town that talks about purchasing for that purpose. So, and we're in the process of doing a POS plan. I'm working on the RFP now. And surely.
What you said?
POS, post.
No, I thought you said
Cross,
RFP.
post,
I thought you said the word.
RFP,
RFP.
request for
Okay,
proposals.
sorry.
So at some point, we need to start thinking about green space and parks throughout the town. And obviously you control, find land for it.
And Lori, just for your concern, we now have a fee for our development permit that I have April work on that now requires a floodplain, a requirement to look at any piece of, any parcel that is going to be developed, that proposes development. It has to be, reviewed for floodplain, issues and then a floodplain development permit if it's in the floodplain. And that's required, that's gonna be part of our building permit process now. Wasn't part of our process before, but it is now. So that might address some, of what you were worried about.
Depends
So-
on whether, if you're permitted to.
Yeah, and we'll,
It doesn't necessarily have.
okay. So, motion to adjourn?
Well, first I have a comment. I don't think that any property owner should feel that our decisions are based on us being able to purchase their property. I don't want the halls to feel any pressure now or in the future to add that as an agreement. The town should find other ways to negotiate that. It's not something we should make our decisions based on. I understand where we're going and I get the parks. I think it's wonderful that we put in parks, but this is something I don't feel we should ever add into the equation. That is not right on the, I do not feel like that's the right track.
We were dating loud and clear as to that if we're willing to purchase it, great, but other than that, that's where we're at. So yeah, it's not part of any of the future decision making with respect to the development agreement.
As long as that's clear to Dayton as well as the halls.
Yeah, he's shaking his head yes,
Not,
nodding his
not.
head yes.
All right, so, motion to adjourn.
Motion to
Motion to
adjourn.
adjourn.
Wait, what'd you say, Misty?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thanks, Misty.
Thanks.